Okay, so get this, listeners. We got a request to dive into some Alzheimer's research, and you're not going to believe this.
Oh, this is a good one.
Yeah. So apparently there's this tipping point in the brain, and once it's hit, scientists can predict, like with crazy accuracy, when Alzheimer's symptoms are going to show up.
It's all about that amyloid buildup we hear about, right?
Exactly. Amyloid, that sticky protein. We keep hearing it's linked to Alzheimer's, right?
Yeah.
But how does it actually go from just sort of hanging out in the brain to, actually causing problems?
Well, this study, and it's a pretty solid one, published in Neurology, one of the top medical journals out there.
Ah, so it's legit.
Yeah, definitely legit. They followed 236 people over time, and everyone got multiple amyloid PET scans.
Hold on, back up. Amyloid PET scans. Remind me what those are again.
Right, so these scans, they use a special dye that attaches to amyloid, which lets researchers actually see how much is built up.
So they're literally watching amyloid accumulate in people's brains. That's wild.
Yeah. It is pretty wild. And what they found is that amyloid, it doesn't just increase slowly and steadily over time. There's this point where it suddenly accelerates. They call it an SUVR of 1.2.
SUVR.
Yeah, just think of it as like a measure of how much amyloid is packed into certain brain areas.
Okay, so an SUVR of 1.2, that's like a red flag.
Exactly. Before 1.2, amyloid buildup is slow and kind of all over the place, especially if you don't have this gene called APOE4. It's linked to higher risk of Alzheimer's.
Yeah.
But after you hit 1.2, it's like someone flipped a switch. Amyloid starts piling up way faster.
And that's when we start to see problems, like actual cognitive decline.
Exactly.
So, wait, they can tell how long it takes for someone to go from that 1.2 tipping point to, actually showing signs of Alzheimer's, like how many years?
Yeah. They were able to turn the amyloid data into a timeline. It's really fascinating stuff. Between an SUVR of 1.2 and 3.0, and that's a high amyloid level, by the way, it takes an average of 17 years for the buildup to max out.
Wow, 17 years. That's a long time. But I mean, it's also kind of scary, right? Knowing it could be slowly building up for that long.
Well, sure. But think about it this way. That's a lot of time to potentially intervene, right?
True. But how would you even know? I mean, do you have to get these PE scans every year or something?
Well, that's where the predictive power comes in. See, by knowing someone's age and their current amyloid level, that SUVR number, researchers could figure out roughly when they hit that 1.2 mark.
Okay, so then they can compare that to when people start showing symptoms.
Exactly. They took that timeline, matched it up with clinical data, and the results, well, let's just say they were surprisingly accurate.
Okay, I gotta know. How accurate?
For 19 people who went on to develop Alzheimer's, they predicted symptom onset with an 84% accuracy rate, give or take 2.8 years.
84%? That's incredible.
It is. Just imagine, a single scan could potentially give you a personalized timeline. You'd have an idea of when those symptoms might show up.
That's mind-blowing.
It really is.
So with this timeline, could we theoretically start treatments like years earlier? I mean, even before symptoms even appear.
That's the hope. Early intervention could be game-changing.
This is all so fascinating. Okay, so we've got this timeline, this tipping point, but there's got to be more to it, right? It can't be that simple.
You're right, it's not that simple. There's a twist. The study found that older people tend to develop symptoms faster after they hit 1.2.
Really? Even if they have less amyloid buildup than younger people?
Yeah. It seems counterintuitive, right?
It does. You'd think more amyloid would equal a faster decline.
You'd think so, but it might be because of something called cognitive reserve. Think of it like your brain's backup generator.
Okay, I'm following.
So as we age, that generator, it gets a little weaker. An older brain might just be less resilient to even small amounts of amyloid buildup.
So it's not just how much amyloid you have, but how well your brain can handle it. Fascinating. But hold on. If this tipping point is so predictable, does that mean everyone with amyloid buildup will definitely develop Alzheimer's? Like, is it a guarantee?
That's a great question, and it brings us to a really important point. Amyloid is a big piece of the puzzle, for sure, but it's not the whole story.
There's got to be more going on.
There is. There are other factors at play, like genetics, lifestyle, overall health, and we'll dig into all of those next.
Okay, so this amyloid timeline, it's like a starting point.
Exactly.
We can get a good idea of when things might start to change, but there are other pieces we need to consider. I'm definitely intrigued.
We'll definitely get to those. But first, I want to make sure we're clear on how this amyloid timeline is measured. Remember SUVR, that measure of amyloid buildup?
Yeah.
Well, the specific numbers they used in this study, like that 1.2 tipping point, They were based on a very sensitive type of amyloid PE scan.
Ah, okay. So if you used a different type of scan, you might get different numbers.
Exactly. Different scanners, different tracers, that's
Yeah.
the dye they use, even how the scans are processed, it can all influence the results.
Okay, so the exact numbers might vary, but the overall concept of a tipping point and, a somewhat predictable timeline, that would still hold true.
Exactly. It's more about recognizing the pattern, the acceleration,
Yep.
not just focusing on the specific numbers.
Gotcha. So big picture, not just the nitty-gritty details.
Right. Now, before we move on, there's one more thing I think you'll find interesting about this study.
Ooh, lay it on me.
So, remember they were tracking amyloid levels and when people started showing symptoms. Well, the clinicians, the ones actually diagnosing the participants, they were blinded to the amyloid PET results.
Wait, what? They were diagnosing people based on their symptoms alone? Didn't even know their amyloid levels. Why would they do that?
It's all about avoiding bias. They wanted to make sure the diagnosis wasn't influenced by the scan results.
That makes sense.
But here's where it gets interesting. There were a few cases where someone got diagnosed with Alzheimer's clinically, even before their amyloid levels hit that 1.2 threshold.
Hold on, they were showing symptoms even though their amyloid levels weren't that high.
Yep,
That doesn't add up. What's going on there?
that's the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
It's possible some of those cases were misdiagnosed, or maybe they had a different type of dementia that looked like Alzheimer's.
Oh, I see.
But it really highlights that amyloid, as important as it is, it's not the be-all and end-all of Alzheimer's.
So we're back to that complex puzzle idea. Lots of pieces involved. This amyloid timeline, it's powerful, but it's just one piece.
Exactly. It's a valuable piece, but we can't ignore the rest of the picture.
Right. Okay, I'm definitely starting to get the bigger picture here. So we've got this timeline, this tipping point that can kind of predict when things might go downhill, but we also know it's not the only factor. What I'm really curious about now is what this means for people who don't have a lot of amyloid buildup yet. Like, can this research tell us anything about what's happening in the brain before we hit that 1.2 level?
That's a fantastic question, and it leads us to one of the most exciting implications of this research, the potential for prevention.
Prevention. Okay, I'm definitely interested.
But to understand that, we need to dive a little deeper into what might be happening during those early years before we hit the tipping point.
All right, let's do it. I'm hooked.
All right, so you're wondering what this all means for folks who aren't amyloid positive yet, right?
Yeah. That's a huge question, right? Because Alzheimer's, it's not like it just appears overnight. It develops over years, decades even, silently.
Exactly. And that's what makes this tipping point idea so important. Even though this study, it focused on folks who are already past that 1.2 SUVR threshold.
The ones already on their way, basically.
Yeah, but it still gives us clues about what might be happening in that preclinical phase before things really get going.
Okay, I like where this is going. Break it down for me.
Okay, so remember how this study found that amyloid buildup? It was slow and kind of random before hitting that tipping point, especially for people without the APOE4 gene.
Right. It's all over the place.
Well, that suggests there's this window of opportunity, a time when maybe, just maybe, we can step in and change things.
So, like, if we could find the people headed towards that 1.2 threshold, could we actually slow down or even stop the amyloid buildup before it gets out of control?
That's the idea. Think of it like catching a snowball before it rolls down the hill and turns into an avalanche.
Okay, I like that analogy. But how do we find those people? Not everyone's getting amyloid PE scans regularly. That's expensive and not exactly easy to access.
True, but there's hope. Blood tests for amyloid, that's a field that's really exploding right now.
I've heard about those. They're less invasive than PET scans, right?
Way less. And a lot cheaper, too. So they're looking really promising for early detection and screening.
But are they accurate enough? Like, can they really tell you what's going on in the brain?
The research is still ongoing, but so far the results are encouraging. Some blood tests are showing a strong link with what we see on amyloid PET scans, especially when it comes to identifying people who are amyloid positive.
So imagine, just a simple blood test could tell you if you're at risk for Alzheimer's years before symptoms even appear. That's incredible.
It is incredible. And knowing your risk, that could give you the power to make changes, right? Lifestyle changes, maybe join a clinical trial, even just plan for the future.
I see what you mean. So this research, it's not just about predicting when things might go bad. It's about shifting our whole approach to Alzheimer's, focusing on prevention and early intervention.
Exactly. By understanding that amyloid timeline, we might actually be able to change how the disease unfolds.
That's powerful stuff. Okay, so back to the study for a second. They found that even after that tipping point, the speed of amyloid buildup still varied from person to person. What do you make of that?
That's where things get really interesting. It tells us that while amyloid is a big player, it's not the only one calling the shots. There are other factors involved in how the disease progresses: genetics, lifestyle, overall health, even things in the environment.
So two people could hit that 1.2 tipping point at the same age, but one might develop symptoms years before the other because of these other factors.
You got it. And that's why research into these other factors is so important. It can help us understand why some people seem to be more resilient to amyloid's effects than others.
And maybe that'll lead to treatments tailored to each person's situation, right? Taking into account their specific risks and needs.
Precisely. We need to move away from that one-size-fits-all approach to Alzheimer's and start thinking about more personalized preventative care.
I like that. But I gotta be honest, the idea of knowing my own amyloid timeline, it's a bit scary. What if we know too much, too soon?
I get it. It's a valid concern. Information like this can be anxiety-provoking, no doubt about it.
Yeah.
We absolutely need ethical guidelines for how this kind of information is shared and used.
Like imagine finding out you're headed for Alzheimer's, but there's no effective treatment yet. That would be devastating.
You're right. This knowledge, it should empower people, not trap them. That's why research into preventative treatments needs to go hand in hand with early detection advances.
So it's not enough to just know what's coming. We need to be able to do something about it.
Absolutely. This amyloid timeline research, as groundbreaking as it is, it's only truly beneficial if it leads to real, tangible ways to help people. Things they can do now to potentially slow down or even prevent the disease.
Okay, so let's talk about those tangible benefits. Someone finds out they're amyloid positive, whether through a PET scan or a blood test. What's next? What can they actually do?
Well, that's where things get a bit more complex. Right now, there's no cure for Alzheimer's. Got to be upfront about that. But there are definitely things you can do to manage symptoms and maybe even slow the progression. And it all starts with a conversation with your doctor.
Okay, so step one, talk to the doc. Makes sense. But what happens after that? What kind of treatments or interventions are out there?
That's what we'll dive into in part 3. We'll explore the current treatment landscape, some really exciting new developments, and even talk about lifestyle factors that can make a difference.
Ooh, a cliffhanger. You're good at this. All right, I'm on the edge of my seat waiting to hear about these treatments. This has been a fascinating deep dive so far. Can't wait to see where it leads us next.
I'm excited to share more too. See you in part 3.
All right, so we're back, and I'm ready to get to the heart of the matter. We've talked about this amyloid tipping point, this idea that we can predict when Alzheimer's symptoms might show up. But the big question is, what happens then? What can you actually do if you find out you're on this path toward Alzheimer's?
I think that's the question everyone wants answered, right?
Yeah.
And that's where the hope comes in. Because even though right now there isn't a cure for Alzheimer's, it doesn't mean we're powerless.
Right, right. There's got to be something you can do.
There is. There are treatments out there that can help manage the symptoms, and there's even a chance they can slow down how fast the disease progresses.
So maybe we can't completely stop it in its tracks, but we can at least try to put on the brakes a little. That's got to be a relief for people facing this diagnosis.
It is. And remember, early detection is key here. The sooner you know you're at risk, the sooner you can start taking steps to protect your brain.
Okay, so let's talk about those steps. What should someone do if they find out they're amyloid positive?
Well, first things first, talk to your doctor. They can help you understand what's going on in your specific situation, talk to you about the potential risks and benefits of different treatments, and just make sure you're getting the best possible care.
Yeah, it makes sense. Having a trusted medical professional on your side, especially with something as complex as Alzheimer's, that's got to be a huge help.
Absolutely. And when it comes to treatments, there are a few options available right now. The most common ones are medications that help manage the symptoms of Alzheimer's.
So these meds, they don't actually target the amyloid itself, but they help people cope with the day-to-day challenges of living with the disease.
Exactly. There are two main types: cholinesterase inhibitors and memantine. Cholinesterase inhibitors, they work by boosting a chemical in the brain called acetylcholine, which is really important for memory and thinking.
So it's like giving your brain a little extra support for those functions that are starting to decline.
That's a great way to put it. Now, memantine, that works a bit differently. It targets a different brain chemical, one that's involved in learning and memory.
Okay, so these medications, they're like support systems for the brain, helping to ease symptoms and maybe even help people function better for longer. But what about going after the root of the problem, like actually tackling that amyloid buildup?
That's where things get really exciting. There's been this huge surge in research on drugs that directly target amyloid. Some of them aim to stop amyloid from forming in the first place, and others are designed to clear it out of the brain.
A two-pronged attack, huh? Stop the buildup and clean up the mess that's already there.
You got it. And there's been some pretty remarkable progress. In fact, the FDA just recently gave full approval to a new drug called lecanemab.
Lecanemab, okay. And what's so special about this one?
It's the first amyloid-targeting drug that's been shown to clearly slow down cognitive decline in people with early Alzheimer's.
Wait, hold on. Slow down cognitive decline. That's not just managing symptoms, that's actually changing the course of the disease.
It is, and it's just the beginning. Lecanemab is kind of like a trailblazer, and there are a bunch of other promising amyloid-targeting drugs in different phases of clinical trials right now.
So it sounds like the future of Alzheimer's treatment is looking pretty hopeful.
It really is.
Yeah.
And when we combine these new treatments with the power of early detection, using tools like that amyloid timeline we talked about, we have a real shot at making a difference in the lives of people with Alzheimer's.
That's amazing. But let's step back from the medications and treatments for a second. Is there anything people can do on their own, like lifestyle changes or something, to help protect their brains?
Absolutely. There's a ton of evidence that lifestyle factors play a big role in brain health. Think of it as creating the best possible environment for your brain to thrive.
Okay, I like that. So what kind of lifestyle changes are we talking about? Spill the beans.
Well, a lot of the things you hear about for overall health are also great for your brain. Regular exercise, a healthy diet, lots of fruits, vegetables, those omega-3 fatty
Oh, the
acids,
good stuff.
of course, getting enough sleep. All of these things can help protect against cognitive decline.
So it's not just about fancy drugs and treatments. It's about taking care of yourself, mind, and body.
Exactly. And don't forget about mental and social stimulation, learning new things, picking up hobbies, staying socially active. All those things help keep your brain sharp and engaged.
So challenge your brain, keep it active, and have fun doing it. Sounds like a pretty good deal to me.
It really is. And remember, it's never too early or too late for that matter to start making these changes.
Yeah.
Every step you take towards a brain-healthy lifestyle is a step in the right direction.
That's a great point. Well, this whole deep dive has been incredibly insightful and honestly pretty inspiring. There's so much happening in Alzheimer's research, and it feels like we're on the verge of some major breakthroughs.
I agree. And I think the most important thing to remember is that knowledge is power. The more we learn about this disease, the better equipped we are to fight it.
Well said. A huge thank you to our expert for taking us through this fascinating and, let's be honest, pretty complex topic. And to you, our listener, thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the world of Alzheimer's research. We hope you've learned a lot and maybe even come away feeling a little bit more hopeful. Remember, this is just the beginning of the conversation. Keep learning, asking questions, and be proactive about your brain health. Until next time, stay curious.